Najah never found his wife and child in Iraq. We had actually followed him going back to Iraq looking for them. But he has sisters and brothers in Vancouver who have been very good and taking care of him.
He didn't find the child and the mom and the wife?
There were child soldiers, Iranian
Yes,
children that were sent to war. And so Zahid was one of them. And Najah was an Iraqi soldier who was a bit older. He was, 18, but he was still a teenager himself.
of course.
And Zahid found Najah in a bunker, injured amongst his other comrades who were dead. And Zahid risked his own life to get medical supplies to keep Najah alive, even though he was ordered to kill any survivors that he found.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Panacea9 podcast. One world, one family. Today, we embark on an inspiring journey into the power of storytelling, how it shapes our understanding of humanity, fosters connection, and ignites compassion. Our guest is the extraordinary Shin, a producer, writer, director, whose award-winning documentaries have challenged boundaries and sparked global conversations, from artificial immortality, which questions the evolving relationship between humans and technology, to My Enemy, My Brother, a poignant story of war, reconciliation, and shared humanity. Artificial Immortality premiered as the opening night film at the Hot Docs 2021 and earned a Canadian Screen Academy Award nomination. My Enemy, My Brother earned an Emmy nomination and was shortlisted for a 2016 Academy Award. Anne's work reminds us of bonds that transcend borders and conflict, and I look forward to explore her groundbreaking approach to film, her fearless storytelling, and the way her work compels us to see the world and each other with new eyes. Let's dive right in. So good to see you here and have you with us for this, what promises to be a wonderful conversation.
Thanks for having me, Gloria. Glad to be here chatting with you.
Yes, I recently became aware of your work, and the more I looked into what you've done so far in your young life, the more impressed I was. Really quite inspiring what you've done. So in Artificial Immortality, you explore the boundaries between humanity and technology. How do you see these advancements in technology reshaping our shared understanding of what it means to be human and connected as one global family? Of course, if you could please start with explaining a little bit about the project itself and then go into the
Artificial Immortality is a film that explores how there are futurists and biogenetic scientists and technologists who are exploring how we can lengthen our lifespan with the combination of biological kind of advancement as well as technological advancement. In particular, I spoke with neurologists as well as specialists in AI. And so there are some who believe that one day that there will be the merging of humans and AI technology. And in fact, with Elon Musk's company Neuralink, they've already started creating the computer brain interface where there's a kind of a chip or a device that's inserted in your brain and that it can upload information as well as download information to the brain. So there's already the merging of human and technology in that regard. And already with prosthetic arms and legs that are robotic and different to different degrees, there is that kind of the merging of humans and AI and electronics already. And so the film explores, is that really possible? Can we go towards like some futurists think that if we merge with the computer, the machine, that we don't necessarily have to die, that our brains, our personalities, our histories will all be downloaded to the, the computer system, a different substrate, they say. I mean, we say this is
Okay.
carbon, but maybe it's a silicon substrate that it gets downloaded to. And so that the film explores, is that really a possibility? How far off? And why do people want this?
So is it science fiction?
Well, the idea was first explored in science fiction, and a lot of the innovative kind of entrepreneurs are inspired by science fiction. So, in a lot of ways, we're seeing how fiction inspires innovation in reality.
Well, I agree with that. I mean, so much of what we see today was science fiction not that long ago.
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah.
even just a couple of decades ago, we didn't think of some of this stuff. But yet, when it comes to humanity, um, and the concept of the soul, especially, is the idea of man and robot becoming one is sort of something that may not appeal to so many people because then what happens to the soul? We mean how does the soul come into the film? Like, is
Well,
it
that's
even mentioned?
yes, we do explore that. And it's interesting, like you were talking about the blending of humans and AI systems. Like there's been movies like Her or After Yang that takes a look at like artificial intelligences and how humans form these rich emotional relationships with these AI systems. But yeah, in terms of the concept of soul and, can you really replicate a soul or consciousness? I talked to a Buddhist monk and
Okay.
he was saying, I mean, you can't really replicate consciousness. We're all in some ways expressions of a kind of a life force or a cosmic life force, whether it's us or this robotic system.
Well, it sounds to me that okay, now AI, let's say Chat GPT, for example. You talk to it and you tell it what you want and it gives it right back to you as if there was a person sitting there researching it and then answering you with the responses. So I can understand from an intellectual point of view, the longevity may exist, that we may go on. Like if for example, whether it's Elon Musk or hopefully someone with a conscience,
That's
not
a
him.
really good point here and to bring up in this
I mean,
discussion.
it's scary that someone who has no conscience is actually working on something like that. Now, that's my view. You can definitely disagree with me, and please voice your disagreement if you do. But the moment you said the word, his name, I just got scared. And I said, okay, well, then, maybe consciousness doesn't matter. Maybe right and wrong doesn't matter. It's all about, the intellect and the mind that can be programmed into a machine, and the robot can continue thinking the same way as a human, but then maybe be psychopathic because empathy is lacking. Because could we transport empathy as well to the robot?
Yeah, I mean, you raise some good points here between the notion of consciousness and conscience, and consciousness, whether that can be replicated in an AI system. I highly doubt it. There have been fun sci-fi programs like Upload, or where that was a comedy by Greg Daniels, where you could upload your mind and then live in the
Yes,
virtual life and then download it again. They're trying to figure out how to download that consciousness back to a
right.
human body. I doubt that that we could have a continued consciousness that continues if we try to download it to a silicon system, like a silicon-based system, like an AI system. But in terms of conscience, I think that's a really important word to bring up while considering developments in AI, because one would hope that there's a moral code that people are adhering to, but what you can't trust that that's in play. I mean, the same people developing weapons are also not that's the same, but it's the same laws and regulations applied to people developing weapons as those developing AI. And people developing
Or
AI,
medicine, or
yes,
the nuclear power, or a lot
it
of
can
those things.
it can be put to evil use as well as to good, and that's the unfortunate danger of developing such a powerful tool, which is already outstripping the creators. The AI systems have already surpassed the human creators who've created them. So the developers who've developed AI systems, what the AI systems do in terms of arriving at an answer, the developers don't really understand what goes on. They say it's a black
Yeah,
box.
yeah. The
Yeah.
creation becomes better than the creator. Yes. I absolutely get that. In fact, it's interesting that you brought that up because I started my activities in theater, and when I would write a script, and then it would go on stage and it will be staged in the final production. Sometimes I wondered how the end result came about. I wrote, I produced, I directed, and yet the final results, when I see it, it's got a life of its own. It's just so crazy how the the creation takes over what the creator was hoping to
Yeah.
achieve. So what were the feedbacks from audiences who saw this?
A lot of people were really concerned about the technological of what was happening in terms of the advancements in AI. A lot of people were very intrigued at the notion of creating your own avatar, and that's becoming more and more popularly espoused. The idea that you could have your own AI avatar. Let's say someone wants to come to Gloria Yazdani and get some advice about how to create a play or write a script. You could also have an avatar made where the avatar just kind of gives your knowledge to them, and you could charge them at a discounted rate for your time to deal with your avatar as opposed to you. Like, this works well with lawyers and other kinds of people where there's a lot of information that's repeatedly given out to people. That's
So you clone your brain and then you hire your cloned brain to work for you.
well, you've developed it, and then people can come
Yes.
to you and they could go to your chat bot, your avatar Gloria, for advice at a lower rate than having a meeting with Gloria in person.
Right, right.
So that's happening.
So, Anne, let's move on to one of your films that I'm mostly interested in because I happen to be Iranian, and I think that my it's My Enemy, My Brother was about the Iranian and Iraq war, right?
Yes.
So that is something that affected my family and myself and so many people that I know very closely. So when I found out about it, I became very interested, and I'm sure our our viewers would be interested as well. Can you tell us something about that? What prompted you, first of all, to pursue such a project, and how did it develop, and what was the outcome?
So I first heard about this story of this Iraqi soldier who was saved by an Iranian soldier during the Iran-Iraq War, and how they happened to meet again 20 years later in Canada. And I was so taken by this story that I went out to Vancouver to meet them and just to hear more about their story. So Zahid Haflang was a child soldier during the Iran-Iraq War. And if, for those who don't know, it was a very brutal war. It was one of the most brutal wars of the 20th century.
Took about 10 years, I think, right? 8 or 10 years?
Yes, and there were child soldiers, Iranian
Yes.
children that were sent to war, and so Zahed was one of them, and Najah was Iraqi soldier who was a bit older. He was, 18, but he was still a teenager himself.
Of course.
And Zahed found Najah in a bunker, injured amongst his other comrades who were dead. And Zahed risked his own life to get medical supplies to keep Najah alive, even though he was ordered to kill any survivors that he found.
Right.
So he did this for 3 days. He kept Najah alive. And then there was a truce that was called during that battle. It was the Battle of Khorramshahr in the Iran-Iraq War.
Very familiar with the city.
Yeah, in the south. And because Zahed kept Najah alive for those 3 days, he was able to spare Najah's life. He didn't have to be executed in the end. He was taken in, given medical attention, and then he was taken as a prisoner of war. And their paths parted. And I was just so inspired and moved by the fact that this young boy soldier would risk his own life to save an enemy soldier. And it was because in the bunker where he found Najah, Zahid didn't see the enemy there. He saw another teenager in front of him who was injured, who needed help. A teenager who actually he was a little older. He had
Another human being.
a woman, yeah, a woman and a baby as well, a photo. And he thought, oh, I can't let this man die. And so he just was acted on his own conscience and his own out of empathy. He just risked his own life. He didn't even think about it. He just risked his own life to save Najah. And so I thought this story was so inspiring that, not only did, one young man, one boy kind of eschew the political boundaries and the political affiliations, and also in the time of war, he flaunted it all and decided to just act on his conscience. And I thought this should be a note of inspiration for any of us, whether it's a bully meeting another kid in a schoolyard, or if it's someone meeting and judging someone on a bus stop or at a subway platform. I think whenever we encounter another person, I think I was inspired by Zahed's action to just think about, like, just we should be coming from a place of empathy and recognizing our common humanity. And that's
That's
why I wanted to tell their story.
that's wonderful. That's beautiful. So I'm assuming that these two soldiers were able to leave their native land, and the one who was captured in the war was freed eventually, or did he run away?
So Najah, who was a prisoner of war, was kept a prisoner of war for more than 10 years. The Iran-Iraq war had ended, but Iran kept the Iraqi prisoners of war for years after the war had ended. So Najah was finally released years later. He was much aged. His body was compromised. It's like his hair was all white, even though he wasn't that old. And he was able to get help from his sister to come to Canada, where his other family were. And so he came to Canada that way. Zahed, on the other hand, had started working as an engineer and was working on ships. And he ended up passing through Vancouver on a ship and disembarked from the ship in Vancouver and ended up starting a life there. Starting his life there. Zahed and Najah ended up meeting at a counseling office in Vancouver, a counseling center for vets.
And they recognized each other after so many
They didn't
years.
at first. So they were just chit-chatting. They had aged a lot. And Zahed was saying, Najah was speaking Farsi. And so Zahed was saying, "Are you Iranian?" And he goes, "No, no, I'm Iraqi, but I learned because I was a prisoner of war during the Iran-Iraq war." Zahed said, "Well, yeah, I was in that war too. Brutal war." He goes, "Yeah, brutal war." But, Najah was saying, "But there was a young Iranian soldier, so young, he didn't even have a beard yet. He saved my life." And Zahed says, "Is that so?" Because I saved a brother, an Iraqi soldier during the war. And he goes, "Really? It was in the Battle of Khorramshahr." And Zahid goes, "Me too. I was in the Battle of Khorramshahr." And they started talking about when it was. And then Zahid said, "Do you have the scar down your belly? Do you have stitches here?" And Naja says, "My brother, how do you know? How do you know all this? How do you know this about me? Did my brother tell you?" And Zahid says, "I'm the one who saved you 20 years ago." And so that's how they met. They didn't realize until they started talking about their experience in the war.
There is when nothing bad matters anymore. When you see that kind of humanity, that kind of genuine love and affection and purity, that's when you have hope that regardless of what happens, that we do advance on the bright side as well. And that's wonderful to hear. Wow. Then you found out about them and approached them, or did someone approach
I
you?
approached them. I found out about them and I approached them. And I sat down with a coffee, mint tea, with a mint
Minty.
tea. And it was so nice. We sat together. And I thought it would be like a 1 hour meeting, but it was like 2.5 hours later, 3 hours later, I was like, oh, I was crying. And I was like, it would be my honor if I could help tell this story to the world. And they agreed. They said, yes, we would like to tell our story.
And are you still in touch with them?
Yes, I have been in touch. So Zahed runs a mechanic garage shop in Vancouver,
Right.
and Najah has been doing flea market sales.
Both have families, I'm assuming, and moved
Zahed
on.
has a wife and two kids. Najah never found his wife and child in Iraq. We had
No,
actually followed him going back to Iraq looking for them, but he has sisters and brothers in Vancouver who have been very good and taking care of him.
he didn't find the child and the mom and the wife.
No.
Wow.
Part of the reason why we went through so many the neighborhoods and reached out to people, and part of the thing might have been just that for the woman to be able to move on, she might have had to have changed her name, or
Right.
because he was in prison for more than 10 years, so he was gone. She thought she was dead.
Yes, they probably assumed he was dead, but I'm glad that he has other family around him, and
Yes, yeah,
Wow,
very good family.
what experience to go through. Yes, the Iran-Iraq war was so horrendous in so many ways, and the worst way was the fact that children were actually given the key to heaven, sent off to war to
Yeah,
earn their entry into heaven.
yeah.
That's when spirituality becomes superstition and dangerous.
It's a
Because
tool of propaganda, really, in that instance, right? The keys to
right.
heaven that were handed to the kids who were basically cannon fodder. It was so tragic. Yeah.
Very tragic. And some of them didn't even make it to the battlefield because they were destroyed on mines before they even got there. Yes, it was a dark, definitely a dark era in Iraq history. Unfortunately, the darkness still subsides. It hasn't quite, the clouds haven't opened up yet. But then again, what can you do? You do your best. You do whatever you think can be done and move on. Was this film shown in Iran or in Iraq?
It was shown in Iran a lot. There was a short version was released on YouTube, and there was a there was a Persian version with the subtitles and dubbing. Yeah, we went and met with Najah's family in Iraq, and when they met Zahed, Najah's sister like hugged Zahed for so long and said, thank you for saving our brother. And it was just a beautiful moment. It was so moving. And they were very happy that they were part of the film because, in that part of Iran and Iraq, particularly everyone is Shiite. And they were saying, we feel like we're brothers and sisters. There shouldn't be a border here.
Right. Well, you ask me, there shouldn't be a border anywhere. You don't have to be neighbors in countries to be brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
We're all brothers and sisters. Okay. Climate and geographical situations have made us all look different, but bottom line, we are one family and we do need to act like brothers and sisters. And when we see or hear stories like this, and that's why they're so powerful, is that's when we realize, why were these two groups of people fighting to begin with? If this is the degree of love that they have for each other, so
Yeah.
obviously the potential is there.
Yes.
The potential for love and compassion is there,
Mm.
but circumstances made them go to war. Anyway, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Lovely to hear all these inspiring stories. Thank you, everyone, for being with us. This has been a Panacea9 podcast. One world, one family. Thank you again, Anne, and bye for now. Bye, everyone.
From scattered fragments to global unity, healing our world together.
Another rebel fought a different empire with no weapons and no army. There was no war. His name was Mahatma Gandhi. Do you know what his rebellion was? Salt. His rebellion was salt. Yes, salt. The white stuff we add to almost all that we eat. 1930, the man walked 240 miles to the sea, where he picked up a handful of salt and declared Indian independence. Why? Because the British had taxed salt, an essential item, making it illegal for Indians to gather their own salt. But remember, Gandhi's Salt March wasn't just about salt, it was about dignity, again, about reclaiming the most basic rights from a colonial power that saw itself as invincible. With every step, he challenged injustice.